Major production funding for Vote Utah 2016 comes from Domo, connecting people with data to change the way business is managed. Domo's customers include 20% of the Fortune 50, leveraging Domo to find insights in their data and take action to improve results. Domo, powered by the Business Cloud. Learn more at domo.com. Additional production funding comes from Utah Community Credit Union, celebrating 60 years of inspiring smart decisions. Founded on BYU campus, UCCU is a not-for-profit financial institution dedicated to the simple ideal of people helping people. UCCU.com has information on how UCCU can help families and the community. And from Nu Skin, demonstrating a more than 30-year commitment to the community and offering beauty and wellness products. Discover the best you at nuskin.com.
Election Day 2016 brings to a close a contentious contest for president, one that pits an establishment Democrat against a populist Republican newcomer. Utah Republicans look to keep control of major offices, while state Democrats hold out hope for some upset in a year marked by voter dissatisfaction with the status quo. This is Vote Utah 2016 election night coverage. Good evening. With Dr. David Magleby, Distinguished Professor of Political Science here at BYU, I'm Bruce Lindsay, and we welcome you to the 17th General Election Year KBYU TV broadcast built around the Utah College's exit poll. Since 1982, the Utah College's exit poll has been providing Utah's most accurate polling data for state and local and national elections. And that highly respected poll, with its remarkable history, means that it's right here and only here on Channel 11 tonight, where you will learn the outcomes of all of the major 2016 races in Utah, including that one race for president, all at the moment the polls close. Well, Dr. Magleby is the driving force behind and the founding father of the Utah College's exit poll. It's an honor to share the desk with you tonight, Dr. Magleby.
Well, it's not just me. My colleague Howard Christensen in statistics was very much part of this from the beginning. This is a collaborative effort that involves teachers and students from communications, statistics, and political science, but across the whole state. Wouldn't be possible to do this without schools from Utah State in the north to Dixie State in the south and all in between, having students from their courses also participate.
An army of more than 1,000 who've been out at polling places today and for the last 2 or 3 weeks talking to people who had already entered their votes by mail.
That's correct.
How did this come about, Dr. Magleby? Did you wake up one morning 34 years ago and say, I know, we're going to compete with the paid people who are the pundits and the reporters and the pollsters?
Well, it started in 1980. Before I came to BYU, I was teaching at the University of Virginia, and I thought this would be a great election for students to study, a little bit like the one we're experiencing right now. And so I organized a statewide panel study in which we interviewed Virginians before the first debates, and then we re-interviewed them after the election. It was such a good learning opportunity for the students that I thought, you know, I ought to do that again sometime. And then when I came to BYU, I got a call from KBYU, and they said, would you do election analysis for us? And I said, well, could we have some actual data from voters?
What will we analyze?
It would be exit polling data. And they said, sure, we've never thought of that. Let's try it. And due to a consortium of other schools and some generous funders, we've been doing it ever since.
Well, we look forward to the exercise tonight, an educational exercise as well as an informative exercise, and we're grateful that you're engaged and will be with us tonight. We have reports that voters met with long lines this election day. The presidential candidates didn't take too long to vote. Democrat Hillary Clinton voted at her home precinct in Chappaqua, New York. She told onlookers it was a humbling feeling to be in the position she finds herself in. She vowed to serve to the best of her ability if she is elected. Republican Donald Trump also voted in New York at an East Side Manhattan polling place. He greeted a mixture of cheers and some boos today. He told reporters it was a great honor, a tremendous honor, to be casting his vote. He says he has a tremendous enthusiasm about a possible Trump administration. Now, closer to home, it was a slower voting experience in Salt Lake County, Utah's most populous county, planned on many more voters submitting their ballots by mail before today. There are only about 37 polling places where we used to have more than 100. Voters didn't exactly cooperate with the expectation. They chose a great number of them to vote in person. Others did use the vote by mail ballot, but they dropped it off at a polling center. And there were fewer of those centers because the majority of the plan was that most of us would use vote by mail. Plans to open some additional vote centers at the last minute, or 2 weeks ago, ran afoul of some logistical and legal roadblocks. It was too late, really, to change the configuration of the announced polling places. And in southern Utah today, the voting place at the Washington City Library ran out of ballots. This photograph is courtesy of Jake Western. Thank you, Jake. And Donald Trump took notice of voting issues, perhaps in Utah, with his tweet this morning that mentioned problems all over the country. Don't know if he meant Washington County, where they also had a shutdown of all the polling places for a time with a computer glitch, relied on paper ballots for a while. Later tonight, we'll be getting data from the Utah College's exit poll on voter perceptions of their early voting experience and their vote-by-mail experience. Turnout at the locations today is affected by how many people in the state are adopting that recent innovation, vote by mail. Allie Davis of 11 News is keeping track of things at election night headquarters of independent presidential candidate Evan McMullin. That campaign is set up tonight in Salt Lake City at the Union Pacific Depot's Grand Hall. And she has been observing in the past few weeks the workings of vote by mail. What can you tell us, Allie?
That's right, Bruce. 4 years ago, only a handful of counties had the opportunity to vote by mail. But this year, it's a different story. Most Utahns had the chance to drop their ballots in the mail.
The big one's obviously president.
After 30 years, Jerry Paulson and his wife Jill won't be going to the polls to punch their ballots. They, along with about 500,000 other registered voters in Salt Lake County, will drop their ballots in the mail.
I can sit down and fill it out with my wife or my family, so we can talk about who it is or what it is that we're voting for and why.
This year, 21 of Utah's 29 counties are voting by mail. When a ballot arrives to the county clerk's office, the staff scans the ballot and verifies the voter's signature with the record on file. Roseanne Mitchell says the ballots are never left unattended and surveillance cameras always monitor the office.
We put a zip tie through that hole. It's just one more checks and balance for us to make sure that we didn't leave a ballot behind.
Utah's director of elections acknowledges some people are concerned over security issues like voter fraud and hacking, but says the system is safe.
Our system, and quite frankly all the systems in the United States, none of them, the tabulation equipment is hooked up to the internet.
Thomas says voters like the change, but some don't trust the mail system.
I wanted my vote to count.
And still prefer going to the polls.
I'm 88 years old. I'm not sure I can make it to November.
We asked voters whether or not they liked voting by mail in our exit poll. We'll have that information around 8 o'clock. In addition, we will be interviewing Evan McMullin at 8 o'clock with the exit poll information. Stay tuned.
I'm sure he'll be an eager consumer for that exit poll information. Thanks very much, Allie Davis. Actually, we can jump 8 o'clock just a little bit, although we are holding on to the data that's coming in from our exit polls until the polls close as a matter of ethics. We can release some data about how people felt about their voting experience, and Stephen Jameson is on set with Dr. Magleby to help us understand more about voting early and voting by mail.
Stephen Jameson from Reno, Nevada, a senior in political science. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start with some controversies. We saw a little bit of that in Allie's piece, and also Bruce Lindsay mentioned some. What have been some of the controversies with the mail ballots in Utah so far this year?
Yeah, well, the first thing that's on everyone's mind tonight is the fact that the ballots haven't come in as they expected them. They expected a lot more to come in, and they didn't. So that has created the situation down the line of more lines and all that sort of thing.
What were the implications of that for us in doing the exit poll this year?
As an exit poll, it really created a lot of headaches for us because we were anticipating.
You don't look the least bit stressed, Stephen.
Oh, we've been up for the last about 36 hours dealing with headaches.
I don't want to hear about that part.
But we've been trying to figure out how to manage the fact that all these lines have been coming in and that the turnout hasn't been as good for the vote by mail as we anticipated. And that was
another thing that we saw in Allie's piece was that they were doing drop boxes in Salt Lake County,
exactly.
Old mail boxes where people could drop off their ballots. What did we do in the exit poll to adjust for that development?
So yesterday we were thinking about those drop boxes, and so we decided to add extra teams to cover those drop boxes. So you may have seen, if you dropped off a ballot today, you may have seen that there was somebody standing there asking you to vote or to fill out our little questionnaire in your car.
They had a sign, didn't they? Sort of like the pizza place.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in addition to that, let's talk a little bit about the implications for us in weighting a sample. Are there any differences in the kinds of respondents that talk to us by phone or over the internet or perhaps on Election Day?
Actually, the vote-by-mail experiment in Utah started last election cycle in 2014. And so we have some of the data that we used last election cycle. And then we found that there's generally a Democratic bias to the number of people that vote early. Usually there's a lot more people that are Democrats that vote early.
And in terms of when we're interviewing them, is there a difference in terms of who responds in different modes of sampling?
Yeah, so we had to try to figure out how to collect information from all these thousands of people voting early. So we've sent both postcards out to have an internet address that you can go to and fill out the survey, as well as calling people on the phones. And we found that the people who tend to respond online tend to also be more Democratic than the people that respond over the phone.
Do you have an explanation for that, Stephen, or is it just a wild guess?
There's a few things that we can think about. We can think about maybe age of the respondents, that maybe more Democrats are younger and more tech savvy. That's some of the things that we've considered.
And in the program later tonight, Bruce will be releasing some of that same data from 2016 to talk about whether that same bias, if you will, in the sample persisted into 2016.
Whether that held.
And the other thing is how we try and correct for it in weighting of the sample. I think the short answer to everyone's question is we were glad we were interviewing in all three modes, through the internet, on the phone, and in person today, because when we put it all together, we think it's the most complete picture.
How big is the sample size when you put it all together? It must be ginormous.
So the N must be now over 15,000?
I think so.
15,000 respondents and counting. We continue to interview, Bruce. So people are in line and voting as we begin this program. And until the last voters have left the polling places, we will be interviewing them. Or until we run out of questionnaires. And that's happened in some of our AM precincts. The turnout was so heavy that we ran out of the 300 questionnaires or 400 questionnaires we sent to that voting place.
All right, which is not as critical as if they run out of ballots.
No, it's not.
Thank you very much, Stephen Jamieson.
Thank you.
Utah's lieutenant governor has the statutory responsibility of overseeing elections in the state. This is the Super Bowl for him. He joins us live from the governor's mansion on South Temple in Salt Lake. We welcome Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. I'm told there may be a bit of a delay here, so please bear with us, Lieutenant Governor. But this is a big day for you on many levels, isn't it?
Lieutenant Governor Cox, this is a big day for you. It's elections. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Well, we're doing great. It is the busiest day of the year for me and for my staff as we oversee elections, and we're also in the middle of a race. So it's a busy day, but it's a good day for the state of Utah.
So, Lieutenant Governor, there's how's voting gone today? We heard about Washington County with some voting machines, but overall, how has voting gone so far in the state?
Yeah, overall, it's been really good. There are always some glitches, and we had a big one in Washington County. Unfortunately, this morning we had about 75% of the machines there that were programmed incorrectly, so we had to get them reprogrammed. We had people voting with paper ballots down there, and so that definitely slowed things down. We've had some longer than usual lines here in Salt Lake County and in a few other locations. But overall, it's been a very successful day with a couple hours to go.
So with those long lines, how have you been able to accommodate the big turnout so far in Salt Lake County?
Yeah, well, again, it's an interesting year because 75% of the state, including Salt Lake County, is vote by mail. And we knew leading up that fewer people were sending their ballots back than normal. We think that's because of the presidential race. Usually people have their minds made up early, but a lot of people waited until the last minute seeing what October or November surprise would come to make a decision, and so they waited. So we did have longer than normal lines. They did add voting machines and add volunteers to help alleviate those lines, so that helped. But we anticipate that there will be some people in line at 8 o'clock when the polls are supposed to close. If you're in line by 8 o'clock, we will allow you to vote. We'll stay open as long as we need to get everybody through that line.
So, Lieutenant Governor, you were trying to push vote by mail. Is there a specific reason why you were pushing vote by mail? Maybe to cut costs, because there's not much of a budget for elections.
Yeah, so there's quite a few reasons that vote by mail is starting to grow. It's been left up to the counties. It's been very successful so far. One of the reasons is it's a little more convenient for people. We tend to have increased voter turnout with vote by mail. We think that that's a good thing. We also get more informed voters because they see the ballot ahead of time. So, for example, example, this year we have 3 constitutional amendments. Too many people get into the voting booth and say, oh, I had no idea these were here. I don't know what they mean. It takes a long time. Now you get a chance to research, see what's on the ballot, and make a decision. So that's a good thing. And then we have the voting machines that are starting to become obsolete. The federal government paid for those machines after the 2000 election. The federal government is not paying for those machines anymore, and they're incredibly expensive. They don't even make these type of machines anymore, and so we have to start looking for different ways to be able to continue with elections, and vote by mail is becoming more popular.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Governor. They're also waiting on those exit poll numbers here at the governor's house. Thank you again. Back to you guys in the studio.
Nathan, if you'll have the Lieutenant Governor stand by just a minute. And my apologies, Nathan. We had a bit of a last-minute change, and I didn't acknowledge you there, but we appreciate Nathan Harker as our man on the spot since we have some audio problems tonight. But Dr. Magleby had a question for Spencer Cox.
Nathan, if you wouldn't mind posing this to the Lieutenant Governor, there was a lot of talk about possible hacking of the election. Some states like Arizona actually had FBI assistance. Would you mind asking the Lieutenant Governor what Utah did to avoid hacking in this year?
Yes, so they're asking about hacking potentially in Arizona. What have you done in Utah to avoid hacking?
Sure. That's been a concern for a lot of people, and it's something that we take very seriously. So we want to make it clear that our voting machines are never attached to each other or to the internet. So it's impossible for some outside influence to come in and hack those machines. We have been working actually for years, long before this election, with the FBI, with Homeland Security, to make sure that that we have the best and brightest and most secure IT people and the work that's going on. And we've been, it's interesting, a lot of people don't know this, but our IT infrastructure, not elections, but statewide, we get up to now 500 million attacks every day from outside influences, from bad state actors across the world. And so it's something that we're very vigilant on, but we want to make clear that that is never attached to any of our voting systems. It would be virtually impossible for the Russians to come in and hack our machines or our vote-by-mail process.
I think Bruce has another question.
Sure.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Nathan, for the Lieutenant Governor. Any forecast for turnout at the end of the day once we have completed in-person voting and early voting and vote by mail?
Yeah, so is there any forecast of turnout in the state of Utah overall by 8 o'clock?
Yeah, we don't have a forecast. Our original returns were down a little when it comes to vote by mail and early voting. So we hit about 80% of active registered voters 4 years ago when Mitt Romney was on the ballot, so that increased turnout. We were anticipating hitting about 70% of registered active voters this election, but judging by the lines we're seeing, it could go a little higher than that. We won't have final results for a few days because with vote by mail ballots, some of them won't even come in as long as they were postmarked yesterday. We won't have them until tomorrow or the next day. They will still count. They will be part of the official canvass. None of the numbers tonight are official until we get all of the votes in and counted over the next 2 weeks. But I suspect we'll be north of that 70% number.
All right. Thank you, guys. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Nathan Harker, Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. Now, when we elect a president in this country, a creation of our Constitution called the Electoral College becomes very important every 4 years. It's not an institution of higher learning. It does its work ultimately in Washington, D.C., where several of our 11 News reporters are on duty tonight. They're watching this remarkable election unfold from the nation's capital, thanks to the generous support of a BYU donor. Well, Kim Anderson is one of our reporters there, and she can explain to us the workings of the Electoral College.
Voters may think that they're selecting the next president, but this is actually the job of the Electoral College.
I just have never understood it, and I'm in my 60s. I just don't get it.
She's not alone. Neither do millions of Americans. Here's how it works. State legislatures nominate electors proportional to the state's population. Congressional members plus senators equal the number of electoral votes. So California, with the most people, gets 55, Texas gets 38, Utah, we get 6. Add all the state electoral votes together, and you get 538. To win the presidency, a candidate must win the majority of these votes, which brings us to the magic number 270. All but 2 of the states are set up as a winner-take-all system, and it will sometimes be the case where a candidate will win the popular vote, but won't actually win the electoral vote. This was the case back in 2000 with Al Gore and George W. Bush, which left many Americans frustrated.
Their votes count, and then we wonder, did our vote count?
So why do we even have the Electoral College? Well, the answer is quite simple. The Founding Fathers didn't trust the public to make the right choice and believed that by having electors, no one would be able to manipulate the public. But it wasn't all mistrust. They built the Electoral College in hopes of equally delegating power to the states. The popular vote is today, but the Electoral College will convene and decide on our next president December 19th. From Washington, Kim Anderson, Vote Utah 2016.
Thank you to Kim. As the state-by-state presidential contest is decided across the country tonight, we'll be referring to the map that you'll see on your screen here that is going to track the all-important electoral vote. There's the map. Maybe I should put my computer laptop down. Dr. Magleby, you want to walk us through that? The dark colors have been called already?
They're fairly predictable, Bruce. South Carolina for Trump, Mississippi for Trump, but West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, all for Trump.
No surprises here at this point.
No, but Oklahoma is a surprise in that it's been called early. I mean, it's in a time zone that we wouldn't have expected. And my notes didn't have it having polls closed at this time. So that's a little bit of a mystery to me, how the Panhandle state got called so early.
Maybe we should just take that with a grain of salt.
So far, I'd like to watch that and be sure. But the other states that have been called for Trump, now we're looking at the dark red, the bright red. And then if you look at, and so for the electoral vote there, it's Trump at 19, Clinton at 3. There are some states that have been called, it appears, for Clinton. That would be including Vermont, and it looks like Massachusetts and Maryland, perhaps New Jersey, but I'm not sure about the coloring. So let's hold on that. It looks like Vermont, though, has been called for sure because the map gave, the flow chart gave her 3 electoral votes. That would be Vermont.
Let's talk about the other, I think, big national story tonight, because the White House represents only one of 3 branches of government, and voters are deciding who will go to Congress for the legislative branch, and in particular the Senate, because the Senate really tonight hangs in the balance, and the math favors pickups from the Democrats, although nobody would forecast that outcome yet tonight. You want to walk us through that?
Well, normally incumbency is a big advantage, and it is in several cases that we'll talk about tonight. But in some instances, senators elected in 2010, who are up for re-election now, came in with the Tea Party class, as they're called. They often surprised people in those states, states like New Hampshire, that we'll talk about early in tonight's program, and Pennsylvania, and others. And so they're highly vulnerable incumbents that have become major targets for the Democrats in this effort to regain the Senate. The other thing to say, Bruce, is this has been a period in the last 15 to 20 years of a lot of change, one way and another, back and forth, in who has the majority in the Senate. In 2000, we ended that night not only with a tie vote for president, but the Senate was 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans. The tie-breaking vote was determined by the Supreme Court decision Bush versus Gore, 5-4, that put Dick Cheney in the vice presidential chair, and he determined that it would be a Republican majority in 2001. So there's been a lot of back and forth. This is a time in which Mitch McConnell could end his time as majority leader, and a new majority leader, since Harry Reid is retiring, would become the Democratic leader.
And the Republicans have held the Senate for the last 2 years, and the balance right now is 54 to 46. And so the Democrats would have to tip 4 states in order to come to that same parity of 50% if Clinton were to win.
That's right. And they're not going to want to bank on that. Both parties are aiming for at least 51 by the end of the night.
Okay, we'll be tracking that and using the help of our regional analysts. In fact, why don't we go to them right now and do a deeper dive?
Well, we've recruited a group of students who've been preparing all semesters to help inform our viewers tonight about the key races around the country, both at the presidential and at the U.S. Senate level. On occasion, we'll talk also about a governor's race and sometimes even a House race. But let's start with Rachel Finlayson, who is from Etna, New Hampshire. She's a junior in political science, and she's been studying the Northeast. And I think we're going to start, Rachel, aren't we, with the New Hampshire presidential. Has there been a call made in that race?
New Hampshire has not been called yet.
Okay, so we'll return to that when it's called, and you can tell us more about it. It's a small number of electoral votes, only 4, but it has been a pivotal state for a variety of reasons. Let's shift then and talk about the New Hampshire Senate race. Has that race been called?
Has not been called yet either.
So tell us about that race. You've been doing research on it, and we'd like to learn more.
Yes, the Senate race in New Hampshire has been extremely close, almost too close to call up until this point. It's looking like Hassan has a slight edge over Ayotte, who's the Republican incumbent.
And who is Hassan?
Hassan is the former governor of New Hampshire. So both candidates are really well known, very popular, well established in the state. It's been a very interesting race, partially because of how expensive it's been. New Hampshire is the second most expensive Senate race this year, and this is a record-breaking year in terms of finance in the Senate elections. And the most expensive race is Pennsylvania, which is 10 times the population of New Hampshire. So it's really a huge amount of money going into a very small state.
Rachel, Senator Ayotte has had a very complicated relationship with Donald Trump in this campaign, hasn't she?
She certainly has.
Do you want to walk us through that?
Yes, with Senator Ayotte, excuse me, she was the former Attorney General, but she is running for Senate. Ayotte, she originally had a very lukewarm approach to Donald Trump, wasn't really supporting him or not. She said that she would vote for him, but eventually, and at one point, she referred to him as a role model for children. She was asked in a debate whether he was a role model, and she replied with absolutely. Shortly after that came out the tape with Donald Trump speaking about women that caused a lot of waves. She tried to walk it back, but it really has come back to hurt her.
I think we have a clip of some of this exchange that we can watch that'll help our voters see how this was playing out in the New Hampshire race. Why don't we go to that now?
Would you, again to the question, would you tell them to be like Donald Trump? Would you point to him as a role model?
I think that certainly there are many role models that we have, and I believe he can serve as president, and so absolutely, I would do that.
If you believe he can serve as president, why won't you endorse him?
Because I've had some disagreements with him, and I've been quite clear about those disagreements.
Well, we've seen some of that in other states as well, and we will through the evening. How did Ayotte respond? Obviously, Hassan had a role in this. How did Hassan and Ayotte respond?
Hassan has really taken this issue and ran with it. Part of the reason why the New Hampshire Senate race has been so expensive is because all of the ads. New Hampshire, also the political climate there, the voters, they really expect the candidates to be very involved. So I think that there were 10 debates, or no, there's 6 debates, and there were many other meetings, lots of campaign stops. So there are many opportunities for Hassan to drive this home and tell voters that Ayotte is in line with Donald Trump, and that really has hurt Ayotte in the polls. Prior to this event, Ayotte was leading, and now it's Hassan.
So one thing we'll want to watch as the evening proceeds, Rachel, and we'll be back to you to get both the presidential and Senate results from New Hampshire, is the impact of this presidential campaign, both Clinton and Trump. Do they help or hurt those people down ballot? And in the case of this New Hampshire race, it looks like Ayotte would have liked to have not had Trump at the top of the ticket, given the grief she's endured. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say.
Well, let's shift to Pennsylvania, a nearby state. Has the presidential race been called there? There was a huge rally in Philadelphia last night. 35,000 people showed up on Independence Mall. What's going on in Pennsylvania?
The race has not been called yet, but it does look like it's going to go to Clinton.
That'll be a big win for her in Trump's strategy. And then, of course, we haven't called it yet. And our rule is we wait until 2 networks have called a race. Then let's turn to the Senate race, another dynamic one.
The Senate race has also not yet been called, but it's looking like, up until this point, the race really has been so close that I'm almost hesitant to say, but it appears that McGuinty has a slight edge over Toomey. McGuinty is a Democratic candidate.
Well, and I think that you've got some evidence for that ready for us on the video screen. Tell us about it, and then we'll watch it.
Yes, I've prepared a clip where Toomey and McGuinty, they're debating, and they're asked by the moderator about their stances on Trump. And let's take a look and see how Toomey dealt with that.
Don't you think your constituents, the people of Pennsylvania, deserve to know if you're going to support the nominee of your party?
I don't think my constituents care that much how one person is going to vote. They're going to make their own decision.
Actually, Toomey went to rather great lengths to make sure that the constituents did not know how he voted, because he delayed voting until the final hour tonight. so that there wouldn't be that much fallout from voters who had voted before. So, Rachel, I'm curious to know, has he said how he voted?
Yes, to me, he refused to say who he was voting for, but he voted within the last hour that the ballots were available, and he voted for Donald Trump. And the reason for his reticence there is because Donald Trump, he arouses such strong feelings in the Pennsylvania voters. In Philadelphia, he's not popular. But to me, he really needed the conservative base of voters to turn out for him, so he was afraid that if he spoke against Donald Trump, then they wouldn't turn out. He also couldn't afford to lose the votes of the more moderate voters in the Philadelphia suburbs. So he was really trying to handle Trump by not handling Trump. But he certainly took a lot of grief from McGinty about that.
That phenomenon tends to play out in the states where there is a tighter contest between Trump and Clinton.
One final quick question for Rachel, if I could. There's been a lot of talk about possible violence in the Philadelphia area because of the supposed stealing of the election and so forth. Was there any violence today in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania that you've been able to observe?
There hasn't been any violence that we have seen. However, there have been a few bumps in the road in terms of voter participation and voting machines. There was a lot of fear among the Democrats that there would be voter intimidation, especially among minorities. And actually, Trump called on his supporters to be vigilantes, so to speak, and preserving the integrity of the election. We actually do have a clip of someone who is a bit of a vigilante. He's following a bus of people who seem to be heading to the polls, and we can take a look at that.
So we're behind this bus, which is like a pastor bus, busing people around to the polls in Philadelphia. And we're going to be releasing video here today showing some people doing some improper things, busing people around. Maybe they shouldn't be doing it. Stay tuned. Project Veritas is all over the country, undercover, on election day, and we're going to be busting the whole thing open.
And of course, it's not illegal to be busing voters to the polls. However, this is just indicative of the climate in Pennsylvania at the moment. Tensions are running really high, and this was not helped by the fact that some voters, while they were at the polls, they claimed that when they selected a Republican candidate, that a Democratic candidate would pop up instead. And that was actually confirmed by one of the election judges. However, it seems that the problem has been solved.
You drew some very interesting states to watch, Rachel. We'll be getting back to you throughout the evening. Thank you very much. A presidential election in this country always draws interest from the international press. And this year, with the unconventional Donald Trump running at the top of the Republican ticket, there's even more international interest than ever. Jalen Boehm of 11 News tells us about that, reporting tonight from Washington.
You may not know who the candidates running for office are in Israel, Russia, or Japan, but people from all over the world know our candidates by name. International media outlets often report on U.S. politics, but this year the attention is even more focused.
This election is unusual, I think. All over the world focus on U.S.
I think it's different from the other previous elections because, people are not sure.
Foreign countries all have different reasons for following American politics.
Canadians probably know more about U.S. politics than they know about their own politics because so many things happen here. It's more entertaining.
But for many international journalists, election coverage is more than just focusing on shocking statements. Crews from all over the world are working around the clock to tell their countrymen how this election might affect them.
It's going to affect our relationship with America. So, we have so many contracts with America. America helps us in so many ways, and, we have a bond sort of relationship.
Foreign correspondents say this election is especially interesting to cover because the states have never seen a politician like Trump before.
There's something weird about Mr. Trump. His comment is very aggressive.
We didn't find any foreign journalists that said they support Trump, but those we spoke with say they worry about what could happen if he wins.
Because of Donald Trump, I hope Hillary wins and, make to the White House and, it's going to be good for the world, not just for Pakistan.
All heads of state will be required to work with whoever the president-elect may be. In Washington, D.C., Jalen Bowman, Vote Utah 2016.
Very interesting perspective from across our borders. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back with more reporting and analysis of today's election, including reports on Utah voters' year of frustration, the Evan McMullen effect, and third-party candidates in general, and a deeper dive into how the KBYU Utah College's exit poll really works, plus an interview with the executive director of the Utah Debate Commission. That's all coming up on KBYU 11's Vote Utah 2016. Welcome back to Vote Utah 2016, KBYU TV's coverage of today's elections in Utah and across the country, featuring the exclusive Utah College's exit poll. And with that poll, we will bring you the exclusive first word on the outcome of the vote in Utah tonight at 8 o'clock sharp. We hope you'll be with us for that. I'm Bruce Lindsay with Dr. David Magleby, Distinguished Professor of Political Science at Brigham Young University. And we were speaking a few moments ago with our panel of student regional analysts, and we were on the East Coast, and we have more states to look at.
That's right. The East Coast is important tonight. It could be a real bellwether and let us know what's going to happen more broadly. I think there's still a little bit before they're going to be able to call some of these, but let's find out. We're going to go to Elizabeth Young, a junior from Sandy, Utah in American Studies. Elizabeth, you've been looking at the mid-Atlantic states, I think we might call them. Let's start with the North Carolina Senate race. Tell us who's running and what's been going on in that particular contest.
Well, North Carolina, it's the home of one of the tightest Senate races in the country. We have two-term Senator Richard Burr, and he's running against Democrat Representative Deborah Ross. Right now, that race is too close to call, and so Republicans and Democrats alike are gritting their teeth, wondering who's going to win this race.
Well, and how have the candidates advertised for themselves and against each other? Probably more likely against each other. Let's look at a couple of the ads. Why don't you tell us about them, and then we'll watch them.
Okay, so Deborah Ross, she has attacked Richard Burr for his record, for not representing the people and doing things for himself. And so this ad will show one of those examples.
I told my friend Deborah to ignore those false attack ads.
You did.
Senator Burr is flat out lying, and that's why people hate politics. Deborah not only supports the sex offender registry, she worked to make it stronger.
It's true.
How do I know? I sponsored the law creating the sex offender registry, and Deborah Ross helped me.
Thanks, Fountain.
Senator Burr voted against funding the federal sex offender registry.
While I was fighting to protect women and children. I'm Deborah Ross, and I approve this message.
So I need to know, who was the older gentleman in that ad?
That's former state senator, Senator Fountain Odom, and he actually sponsored that law. And so that's a really credible source that she's using in that ad.
And North Carolinians would have recognized him and understood that story?
Most of them would have understood that story and recognized him.
He's a charming kind of grandfatherly character. So how did Senator Burr respond?
Well, Senator Burr has been attacking Deborah Ross for twisting the truth in her favor. And so he has an ad that is really effective in showing how she's been doing this. So we could watch that.
Mom, I'm researching the Senate race on WBTV News Fact Checker. It says Deborah Ross's ad is completely false, where she claims she voted to strengthen the sex offender registry.
What about Richard Burr's ads?
Their fact checker says Burr's ads are true. Ross opposed creating the sex offender registry. Looks like her other ads are false as well.
So Deborah Ross is lying about Richard Burr to fool us into voting for her?
Mom, facts don't lie. We simply can't trust Deborah Ross.
I'm Richard Burr, and I approve this message.
So we can see from these two ads that voters really don't know what to do or who to trust, because both seem very credible, reliable, and so that's one of the reasons why this race is very close.
Elizabeth, it's a very, very close race, too, for president in North Carolina, a state where President Obama won in 2008, but Mitt Romney won by the skin of his teeth in 2012, and the president's been back there a couple of times in the last week. Tell us how it's playing out tonight.
Well, right now, that race is also too close to call. Hillary Clinton has just a slight lead in the votes right now, but anything could happen with the remainder of the evening going forward.
What are the factors driving the split in the vote? Isn't it critical? They're playing to different constituencies, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. So Hillary Clinton has been campaigning with President Obama to really help her voter base go out to the polls. And
her
those are
base is
young
who?
people,
Okay.
that's the black community, any minority. And so they've been really pushing to help those people vote. And so if they do, she's more likely to win this state.
There's been a pattern across Rachel's report and your report. Democrats in all three of the Senate races we've looked at so far have been running women for the U.S. Senate. Is that significant?
Women in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, women candidates in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and now North Carolina.
Yes, that is significant. I'm not sure if it's playing as much of a role, just seeing as Hillary Clinton is seen as more of a negative candidate, but we'll see in the next few hours if that does play a role.
And there have been women in the U.S. Senate before from North Carolina in both parties, Elizabeth Dole as well as others in the Democratic Party. Let's shift now to the Florida presidential race. A lot of attention on that. Donald Trump calls it his second home, but I think he calls New Hampshire a second home too. Maybe Nevada for all that. But in any event, what about the Florida presidential race?
This race is a must-win for Donald Trump. And we have about 90% voting in right now, but they're still not making a call on this race because it is so close. And so this race is very similar to North Carolina in that Hillary Clinton has really been playing to motivate her base to go out and vote, which are minorities in the young population as well. And Donald Trump, he could win this state because his base are older white voters, and they have the highest voter turnout.
You know, there's a story about exit polling in Florida that may be why the networks are holding back a little bit about projecting. Part of it is that Florida is in two time zones. It's in the Eastern and Central time zone, and in the 2000 election, it called the race for Al Gore, but before the polls had closed in the panhandle of Florida. And then they had to retract that. So my sense is the networks have ever since been a bit more skittish, which I think is a good idea. And our rule tonight is we don't report a race is called unless two or more of the major networks have called that race. So we'll return to talk about the Florida presidential later. What about the Florida Senate?
Elizabeth, that was thought to be very competitive as well until a certain candidate changed his mind and said he was going to run after all. You want to bring us up to date on that?
Yes, Marco Rubio ran for president. Most people are familiar with him. And he said multiple times that he was not going to run for Senate. But to help maintain the Republican majority, he decided to go in late, and he did win. He did win this race tonight.
So this has been called for Rubio?
Yes, it has been called for Rubio.
Okay, so this is a hold. Republicans are holding that seat. It was one that was competitive. I think that many people have thought he would likely hold it. Was it by a fairly wide margin in that share of the vote that's been in, wider than the presidential race, I assume?
It is wider than the presidential race. It was about 4% for the reporting right now. But there's still more votes that could be counted, but Rubio's far enough ahead that they have called this race.
All right, thank you. Did you have a debate clip you were going to show us?
Yes, I did.
You want to set that up?
Yes, so Marco Rubio and his opponent Patrick Murphy have really attacked each other for their support of their presidential candidates. And so this has been a theme in all their debates in their advertisements. So here's a clip about that.
I believe that Secretary Clinton is as qualified as anybody we've ever had to fill this role. She will hit the ground running on day one. And you compare that to Donald Trump, who's as unfit and unqualified as anybody we've ever had for this office.
Well, I would say if Congressman Murphy trusts Hillary Clinton 100%, he's in rare company, because not even Tim Kaine is willing to say that, and he's her running mate.
I don't understand how Senator Rubio can look himself in the mirror and still stand by Donald Trump's side after everything that's come out about him.
I don't trust either one of them. And the job of a U.S. Senator is not to blindly trust the president because they happen to be from your own party. Of the two of us on this stage tonight, there is only one person who, if I goes to the Senate, will stand up to the next president of the United States, and that is me.
This isn't just a binary choice, and there are people that have the courage to stand up to do what's best. And I appreciate your question, because you do have to look your children in the eye in 10 to 15 years from now and explain this position.
I am thinking about the next generation, Congressman. I'm thinking in specific about my 4 children, which is why I don't want to see Hillary Clinton to be president of the United States, because she will redefine the Supreme Court in a way that will redefine the Constitution of the United States for the better part of a quarter century.
That's just a sample of the divisiveness in the political discourse.
Yeah, you
that
wonder
keeps
if some of the Democrats don't think they're running against Donald Trump rather than somebody else.
Over and over. And I guess, Elizabeth, that once Marco Rubio got back into the race, Democrats in recent weeks have kind of backed off on their funding and have not considered this to be winnable. And hence it wasn't.
Yes, they pulled back funding to fund more winnable states and also less expensive states to advertise in.
All right, thank you very much, Elizabeth Young, our regional analyst. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that many Utahns had a hard time making up their minds in the presidential race. It's been a hard thing for a lot of Utahns to do. If you talk to any of your neighbors, you know they've agonized. Dr. Magleby, besides what you've heard from friends and neighbors and just on the street on the subject, is there any other reason to believe that it took people longer to come to whatever decision they made prior to today?
Yes, I think the one marker that we've already talked about is the much lower rate of early voting among Republicans than we saw in 2014. Democrats vote more early, period, but this year Republicans especially didn't seem to vote early as much. That's a sign that they were indecisive. And then I think when we get to it, Bruce, later in the evening, we actually asked them, when did you make up your mind? And we're going to look with interest at whether they report that it was only in the last few days.
Okay, we'll look forward to that following 8 o'clock. 11 News' Dania Rice is at the NOAA's Event Center in South Jordan, where Senator Mike Lee and Congresswoman Mia Love are holding their combined election night party. Dania, we expect that later tonight you'll be talking with both of those candidates. In the meantime, I know you've been talking with Utahns about how they went through the process of making their choice for president.
I did. Typically, Utahns know exactly who they're voting for when they walk into the voting booths, but this presidential election has them throwing their hands in the air. They're confused. They're frustrated about the two major party nominees.
I'm surprised that they really nominated those two people.
I hate it.
Utahns' opinions on this year's presidential election.
I think it's shameful, in this state especially.
It's a little devastating. I think it's not worth voting for.
Republican Donald Trump.
He's appalling.
Or Democrat Hillary Clinton.
I just couldn't vote for Hillary.
So I think we're all kind of in between a rock and a hard place, making a decision that we don't want to make, and either way, kind of, especially in more Republican states that often don't agree with Trump, like ours. Utah is typically known as a red state, but as some polls have shown, there's been a little bit more blue, with an added third party to the mix. Now, Utahns just don't know what to do. We just have to vote for somebody we don't like.
That's one of those, like I told you, is really tired to make a decision, and I still haven't made my decision.
Hey, I'm not voting.
It's definitely going to be a hard time to see where America goes, but Utah's vote may actually matter this year.
And so, Dania, that's what Utah voters have been up against, and I think everybody's heard that conversation or different versions of that conversation throughout the last number of months.
It will be interesting to see how Utahns vote.
Thanks for that report and for the whiteboard illustration. That was terrific. Now, Donald Trump's entry into the race a year and a half ago kindled election year hopes for third-party and independent candidates. They viewed him, once he was the nominee, as sufficiently unconventional to give them an opening with voters. Andy Mathis of 11 News is live now at the Sheraton Hotel in Salt Lake City, where Utah Democrats will be waiting for election night news. Andy, tell us about this year's third-party phenomenon.
Yeah, Bruce, with both major party presidential candidates being amongst the most unpopular in recent history, many Americans took that opportunity to look at third-party and independent candidates when making their choice for president. Many voters say neither Hillary Clinton nor Donald Trump represents their values, so they are looking for another option. UVU student Ryan Griffith is one who says he feels like he can't trust either Trump or Clinton and will vote for a third-party candidate.
I feel like it's important for everybody to vote for who they honestly think is going to do the best job, especially in something where we're voting on who's going to be the next president.
Third-party candidates like Jill Stein, Evan McMullen, and Gary Johnson say they represent the sole interests of voters.
So do not accept for a minute this predatory idea, this propaganda that we are powerless. Right. We are only powerless if we think we are.
Third-party candidates say they have a greater ability to maintain their identity and stay true to the American ideals.
The time has truly come for a new generation of leadership, a new conservative movement, and I'm confident that together we can build both.
Running outside of the major parties does come at a cost. The candidates are not allowed to participate in the main debates unless they have 15% support in 5 recent polls. This means most remain relatively unknown to the people. The challenges don't faze them, though, and some feel they have a real chance in the election.
I would love to see a poll head-to-head, Johnson versus Clinton, Johnson versus Trump. I think that would really be revealing.
The election on November 8th will reveal how many Americans feel the same as the third-party candidates. While many Americans may have looked at a third-party or independent option, tonight's results will show whether they followed through or if they voted for Hillary or Trump.
And we'll have those results, at least for the Utah vote, coming up at 8 o'clock. Thanks very much, Andy Mathis of 11 News. Now, Dr. Magleby, in recent memory, we've had third-party pushes from Ralph Nader in 2000, a couple of tries from Ross Perot back in the 1990s, and both of them were blamed for siphoning votes off of another candidate and, in effect, throwing the election without really creating a new movement or a viable path to get to the White House. Has that changed?
No, third parties are still in a difficult position to be able to win people over. And to help us understand that is Christian Rupert from Chalfont, Pennsylvania. He's a junior in political science. Tell us a little bit about 2016 as compared to history. Could we make history tonight?
Absolutely. Not since 1968 has a third-party candidate won electoral votes. And this year, Evan McMullin, son of Utah, has a chance to do that tonight.
And 1968 had 3 very interesting candidates. I think our viewers will go down memory lane as we look at their images that are on the screen now. Who were those 3 candidates?
Yeah, so Republican Richard Nixon was the clear winner in a landslide victory. He beat Hubert Humphrey, the Democratic nominee, and George Wallace. And George Wallace is kind of the exceptional one in this group because he was the third-party candidate, and he won 46 electoral votes.
5 states, and if McMullin can do it tonight, will be the first person since then to do it. Now, why is this so rare, do you think?
Yes. Most voters, regardless of the party, think that if you're voting outside the party in a third party, it's considered a wasted vote. And so Republicans and Democrats think it's safer just to vote for their candidate, even if they don't like them, because then it's better than the other party's candidate.
And we saw that, didn't we, when Mike Pence visited Utah and essentially told Republicans, come home. And then after that, I was sitting in my recliner at home, Christian, and the phone rang. I picked it up, there was a delay, and then I heard a very interesting conversation. Tell us about it.
Yes, so there was a robocall from a GOP outside super PAC. And the robocall basically just said, Evan McMullin, called him a couple of names.
Let's actually listen to the tape, because I asked if we could get a tape. Let's let our viewers hear what I heard.
Hello, my name is William Johnson. I'm a farmer and a white nationalist. I make this call against Evan McMullin and in support of Donald Trump. Evan McMullin is an open borders amnesty supporter. Evan has 2 mommies. His mother is a lesbian married to another woman. Evan is okay with that. Indeed, Evan supports the Supreme Court ruling legalizing gay marriage. Evan is over 40 years old and is not married and doesn't even have a girlfriend. I believe Evan is a closet homosexual. Don't vote for Evan McMullin. Vote for Donald Trump. He will respect all women and be a president we can all be proud of. I paid for this ad for the American National Super PAC.
We hope to interview Mr. McMullin later tonight. We'll talk to him about history, and maybe we should ask him about the wasted vote. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that would be a really pressing question, and I think if voters can get past that, I think it will be a very, very interesting night for Utah in general.
And may make history again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christian, for joining us very much.
Well, even if third parties don't make a lot of waves generally, major parties go through evolution.
Well, and third parties do have a policy impact. So you mentioned Ross Perot. He was the guy with the telescopic pointer, and he had charts. He was big on charts. He was not telegenic, but what he did was call attention to one issue, the budget deficit, and it reset the agenda of American politics so that during the Clinton years, Clinton won in that 3-way race, reducing the deficit became a major issue. That was a result of the Ross Perot candidacy.
All right. Now, if you're among those who've been wringing your hands over the state of political discourse in the country, you'll be pleased to be introduced to this lovely woman. Nina Sliding is the executive director of the Utah Debate Commission that was founded a couple of years ago. And one of your goals, Nina, I believe, is to elevate the level of political discourse. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think, especially this year, having gone through the primary debates, I think Utahns had an appetite for civil discourse. So I was very pleased when we came on with our debate schedule starting in September, and it was about 5 weeks of debates, how civil our dialogue was. And I thought we had very engaged, very dynamic debates, but we were still civil and polite with one another.
Was it civil because the candidates were civil, or did you have ground rules that said this is out of bounds?
We had ground rules, and we had great moderators. And I'm sitting next to two of our moderators for the Debate Commission. And I think that was key. I think having moderators who can control and let the candidates express their viewpoints in an engaging way, but yet still have control of the flow of the debate so that it doesn't get out of their hands. And I think that's important.
Isn't it also remarkable how much participation you've had from Utah media? And on many occasions, you had essentially all of the Utah stations covering the debates. I had people who told me they didn't want to watch when I was moderating, but they had no choice. They called it Satan's plan.
It's true. I mean, we have a remarkable consortium of university partners. There are 8 universities on our board, and then we have the 4 public TV stations and the 2 or the 4 commercial stations and the 2 public stations. So we have great coverage of our debates, which we're very thankful for.
Thank you very much, Nina Sliding, for being our guest and for championing Utah Debate Commission. We're approaching 7 o'clock, and we need to break for PBS World, PBS News Tonight and News Hour. We'll be back at 8 o'clock with the exit poll projections. We hope you'll be with us. You won't see it anywhere else.